18 from 2 Elf Schnitz.
8. I don't know.
One
Justice.
for 3.
Okay, Justice drew 3 cards, going to 15. But should he play the Necropotence?
Well, he should have played the Necropotence, definitely. He shouldn't have played the Mishra's Factory. He should just played a Swamp and put down the Necropotence. As opposed to sacrificing the Ebon Stronghold. That was definitely a mistake there.
Hey dudes, today we're talking about Necropotence. Necropotence is very interesting for so many reasons, but what makes it different than most of the cards I discuss is that this card is actually worth talking about. And because Necropotence is worth talking about, many people have, even just on YouTube. Most of the videos I found while preparing this project were focused on the history of the card and its impressive tournament resume, and kind of the culture around the card, I guess. But as far as I could tell, nobody really explained why the card was so good. Most people kind of just explain that you can pay 1 life to draw a card, then go on to explain that people back in the day didn't realize how good card advantage is. That's all true, but unless somebody spends way too much time playing and thinking about card games, even today, this card can be a bit confusing. So in today's video about Necropotence, we're going to go over the most exciting thing anyone can discuss. That's right, fundamentals. Necropotence is a black enchantment that costs 3 black mana to cast. Skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. Pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library face down. Put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. It's not surprising that this card went under the radar for a while, and people still struggle with this one. This card offers incredible power, but it gives you a couple of major pills to swallow before you can access that power. This card has 3 major downsides on the text itself, and is further punishing because it requires 3 of 1 color of mana. That last bit isn't a huge deal, but it is worth mentioning since we're talking about the barriers to playing this card. Skip your draw step is an absolutely insane first line. Even if you aren't aware of the concept of card advantage, you're likely excited by the draw step since it tells you what new thing you can play this turn. It's probably one of the most exciting aspects of the game, and skipping it would set huge alarm bells for anyone, especially at the time, even without a good understanding of what card advantage is. That being said, it's important to note that this isn't always a downside. It's pretty unlikely to happen, but if you skip your draw step, you can't lose the game for drawing during your upkeep with no cards in your library. That's not a major consideration, since that's a really rough situation to be in, even if you don't deck out, because if you had the cards to win, why didn't you do it already? It doesn't come up often, but it can come up. And it's a pretty wild situation, and I'm really only mentioning it just to show that even downsides can have positive effects in the right situation. Cards discarded from your hand getting exiled instead of going to the graveyard is also pretty rough, or at least seems like it can be. A lot of black cards specifically care about the graveyard, and this can trip up stuff like Animate Dead or even stuff like Lurgoyf. You also don't actually draw the cards, and you don't get them until your end step, which means any sorcery speed stuff can't be done until your opponent has a full turn to deal with the situation. All of these downsides seem like they could be very devastating, but the reality is that these downsides, and even the mana cost, actually aren't that big of a deal. So let's talk about why that is. Skip your draw step can obviously come up, and it's pretty obvious what it does, but the card draws you cards in what is arguably the most efficient method in the game, at 1 card per life. That by itself really softens the blow on the skipped draw step. And discarded cards getting exiled also doesn't really matter, because you can just win the game with the best cards you got from Necropotence. Any cards being discarded, you didn't need them. And the last downside is arguably the most important, and probably the reason the card's not quite as good as it used to. At the time, the game was much slower, so giving your opponent that turn didn't matter as much, at least in Standard and stuff like that. But the point here is that all of these downsides mean pretty much absolutely nothing just compared to the sheer efficiency of the card advantage. So let's talk about why card advantage is pretty much everything, using the most simple breakdown of card game fundamentals I can think of. And this might sound stupid, but bear with me here. A card game is played with a deck of randomized cards. This is obvious, but it has major implications here. In Magic, games are usually played with 60 card decks, 20 life, and each player starts the game with a hand of 7 cards. Maybe that's not the most common way to play anymore, but that's how it was played when Necropotence was played, and that's how we're gonna look at the game. Each turn, other than the first player, that player draws a card. In Magic specifically, we have land cards, and these generate a resource that is required to pay for most cards. And these fundamental aspects of this game affect how consistent a deck can be, and they add variance to the game. Players, especially at a competitive level, usually try to raise consistency as much as possible. And that's because they're trying to win. And consistency is the key to Necropotence's power. Necropotence lets you draw so many cards, it doesn't matter what the downsides are. It's so efficient in terms of card draw. To illustrate this, I'm gonna goldfish a couple of games quickly just to show why Necropotence is so insanely strong. The short answer, if you can't be fucked, is that it lets you see so many cards that you are very likely to be able to craft the perfect hand for your situation, which is really, really good in a game built around variance. This deck list was piloted by Leon Lindback in 1996 at Pro Tour New York. This is one of the earliest examples of Necropotence hitting the top 8 of a tournament. Interestingly, this deck was viewed as a mono-black aggro list, despite having 11 creatures in it, and its main game plan wasn't necessarily to get to Necropotence. Necropotence was very good, and this deck did run 4 copies, but it didn't go all into the Necro plan, and didn't really run any of the searchers that were available, and instead it just kind of played like a sort of mid-range aggro deck, with Necro being used to help bolster the main game plan of disrupting the opponent's hand, and swinging in with low-costed creatures or hitting them with a massive drain life. I thought this deck would be historically interesting to look at, and I ran this through Moxfield's playtest feature a few times to showcase why Necropotence is so fucking good. And I guess this is a good time now to point out that Necropotence has fallen off in terms of power. The card is insane, but it is really slow, and that slowness has caught up to it to some degree. It's certainly still strong enough to see some CEDH play, and maybe you can get away with playing it in Vintage, I don't know, but the card is less impressive than it used to be. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get started. So, this first game I'm going to show you how the deck functions when it doesn't draw Necropotence, to kind of give you a baseline. Full disclosure, I'm no expert at piloting this deck, and it's arguable I didn't cast the right spell at the right time, but this is a goldfish, so the point here isn't to see perfect play from this deck, but rather to get a sense of what the draws can look like and how fast the deck is. So, my opening hand is a Hypnotic Spectre, 3 Swamps, Order of the Ebon Hand, Serrated Arrows, and a Hymn to Turak. This deck didn't really have a turn 1 play, which was pretty common in Type 2 at the time, so we'll just play a Swamp and pass. Our second turn we draw a Drain Life, but that won't be relevant for a while. So I was going to play the Ebon Hand here just to get a creature out, but it is probably way smarter to play the Hymn to Turak first, so I changed that. Turn 3 starts with drawing Ebon Stronghold, which comes into play tapped and can be tapped and sacked to add 2 black mana. Ebon Stronghold is a hilarious card to be running in a tournament, but it's honestly not terrible at the time. I'll play the Ebon Stronghold, it enters tapped, but I can still play the Ebon Hand, so it's not that bad. Anyway, it's turn 3 and we've ripped 2 cards from our opponent and have a 2-1 in play. Magic sure was fast back then. Turn 4, we draw Dark Ritual and play out our 3rd Swamp, giving us 4 or 5 mana, or more with the Dark Ritual. So it's places like this where goldfishing breaks down. I could play the Serrated Arrows, which would likely be the correct choice if my opponent was more aggressive than me, or I could play out the Hypnotic Spectre here, or I could cast a Massive Drain Life if that would be the play. I'm just gonna assume my opponent would be doing something, so I spent turn 4 just casting the Serrated Arrows. And because I don't actually have an opponent, I just throw it right in the graveyard and assume that over the next 3 turns I would have used it to blow up or weaken a creature. It's hard to say what order to play these cards in, since it does depend on the opponent that I don't have. But with turn 5 we draw another Serrated Arrows. How lucky. So this turn I'll play out the Hypnotic Spectre that I probably should have played out a few turns ago, since this discards a card every time it gets in, but we're playing it now. Turn 6 comes around and we draw another Hypnotic Spectre, which we can immediately play. Remember, we do still technically have a Serrated Arrows in play to mess with their board. I'm just not bothering to show that since we don't actually have an opponent here. Turn 7, we draw another Hymn to Torak, and then on turn 8, we draw a Neverall's Disc. And I'm gonna stop there because you can see the aggro elements to this deck, and depending on what the opponent is doing, this would have either been disrupted or won by this point. So you can see that decks at the time were pretty slow compared to like what you'd see today in higher power formats, and weren't super consistent. But let's take a look at what your options are if you manage an early game Necropotence. So in this hand we have a Soul Burn, a Hypnotic Spectre, Nev's Disc, Dark Ritual, a Swamp, Ivory Tower, and of course, Necropotence. This hand would be potentially awful if Necro wasn't in this hand, but only having one land isn't a problem if that land casts you a Dark Ritual, which casts you a Necropotence. So let's see how this goes. I'm gonna start with the Ivory Cup though. Games were slow back then, and I would like at least one draw before I deploy the Necro. Ivory Cup gives you 1 life for every card in your hand above 4 at the start of your upkeep. This will basically just give me an extra 3 life during each of my upkeeps once I get Necro in play. Then, at my upkeep, I'll gain 1 life since I had 5 cards in hand before the draw. I draw an Order of the Ebon Hand, which isn't a terrible draw, but I was really hoping for a land. Oh well. I'm going to cast the Dark Ritual so that I can cast the Necropotence. If this was a real game and that got interrupted, I would probably lose because this hand was super fucking greedy. But it is hard to get interacted with when you don't have an opponent. Either way, we can't really play anything else this turn, so I'll just activate Necropotence. I'm going to pay 6 life to look at 6 cards. This playtesting software is a little awkward when it comes to resolving unusual cards, and there really isn't a way for me to exile them face down. At least I don't think there is. So for this demonstration, I'm just going to put each card exiled onto the field, and we'll just pretend I can't see them until they go to my hand. But for this demonstration, I'll only be activating Necro right before my end step, so it doesn't matter. But now that my turn is ending, I can look at 6 extra cards, then sculpt my hand to the perfect 7. I got an Ebon Stronghold, a Nev's Disc, a Strip Mine, 2 Swamps, and a Drain Life. And as I said at the end of my turn, I can only have 7 cards, so I need to choose the best 7 out of these 11 cards I have. Strip Mine would probably be correct against an actual opponent, but I'm just going to take the 2 Swamps and the Drain Life here. I did debate tossing both Nev's Disc, but I did decide to keep one. One of the reasons that you would even play Nev's Disc in this deck is to blow up your own Necro once it's served its purpose, if that comes up, but I really don't think that'll come up in a Goldfish, and the rest of these cards get exiled. The playtester auto-draws when you switch the turn, and there might be a setting to fix that, but I didn't look around, and I just tossed the card back into the deck and shuffled it, which should be fine for the purposes of this demonstration. We've hit turn 3, and I gained 3 life at upkeep via the Ivory Tower, going back up to 18 life. I'll play another Swamp and drop the Ebon Hand. I'm down a land drop, which is fairly rough, but I think I'll be okay drawing like 6 cards a turn. I'm going to activate Necro, pay 4 life, and get another 4 cards. Serrated Arrows, Necropotence, Swamp, and Drain Life. With the 5 cards I have, I do have to choose 2 cards to discard into exile. I'm gonna just take the Drain Life and the Swamp. Serrated Arrows would likely have been correct if, I had an opponent that was playing anything, but I don't, so I'm gonna put it into exile. Then it's turn 4. Oh, I drew another Serrated Arrows, but I skip my draw step, so back into the deck it goes. I gain another 3 life, bringing me back to 17. And that would have happened before the skip draw step, but whatever. I'll of course hit my land drop, and now I can play out Hypnotic Spectre. Also, I probably would have attacked here. This time, I'll pay 7 life to look at 7 new cards. I got a Swamp, Serrated Arrows, Hypnotic Spectre, Swamp, Hymn to Torak, Dance of the Dead, and Knight of Stromgald. Still, I do need to ditch 5 of these 12 cards. I'm gonna ditch Soulburn since it's mostly just a worse drain life in this list, and I think I have enough of them. I'm probably keeping the Hippie and the Turak because obviously they're like the best cards that aren't Necropotence. Dance of the Dead is a really good card, but in this situation, I don't have an opponent's graveyard to cast things out of, and I am exiling pretty much everything, so it doesn't really do anything for me here. Still, this is kind of tricky, especially since I should probably at least pretend I have an opponent. I considered the Serrated Arrows for that reason, but whatever. I ended up choosing the Bodies and the Hand Rip spell. Turn 5 comes along and we jump back up to 13 life. This turn, I play a land, play out the Knight, and use the Hymn to Torak. I'd also likely attack if it was safe to do so. I'll pay another 6 life, going to 7, and I'll look at 6 more cards. Swamp, Hymn, Necro, Hippie, Swamp, Swamp. I'll definitely take the Hymn and the Hippie, as well as the land. I'm debating on grabbing a second land and getting rid of the disc, but that would probably be stupid in an actual game. It's hard to say since so much of it depends on what your opponent does. I decided to keep it though. And I exiled the rest of the cards. Then turn 6 comes around, and I forgot that Tower exists, I guess, because I don't gain the 3 life I was supposed to. Whoops. I'll cast the Hymn after I hit my land drop and cast out another Hippie. Since I spaced on the 3 life that I should have gained like a fucking idiot, I only activated it for 3 so that I wouldn't go into Lightning Bolt range, but I should technically have more life here. Oh well. Anyway, this is kind of winding down here, and it's really hard to figure out when you would win a game, since you're likely going to get blocked or interacted with at some point, but I really hope that this has shown you the potential of how insane Necropotence is. By turn 7, I had 12 permanents out, a full grip pretty much the whole game, and had seen over half my deck. I really hope this highlights what exactly is so strong about Necropotence, because I don't know how else to explain it. The amount of choice you have in each turn is pretty high, and you can be incredibly versatile with this card as well. It certainly isn't the fastest thing in the world, but if you can hold on for like 3 or 4 turns, it ramps your game up to insane levels. Necropotence is such an interesting card, and there's good reason so many people have made dedicated videos on the card. Speaking of which, some of the videos that I personally really enjoy about Necropotence are posted into the description. I just think these videos, for the most part, are either fantastically well done, well researched, or just interesting and fun, and I think they're worth a watch if you are interested in more news about Necropotence, so you can check those out. Yeah, I don't know, there's so much about this card we could talk about, but much has already been said by those that could say it better. So I guess all I really have to talk about left is the art. The original art was illustrated by Mark Teeden, and this shit slaps so fucking hard. This is just an iconic banger. The art for this card is so amazing. I love it so much. I love it when strong cards have art that goes hard, and this goes hard in my opinion. It's not the only art that this card has though. Dave Kendall illustrated this version that originally appeared in From the Vault Exiled, and this art is also amazing. I prefer the OG because of the way that I am, but this one is insanely well done too. It's very cool. There was also a Secret Lair version done by Rafael Westerowics. Sorry for getting your name wrong, but your art goes hard as fuck. Very obviously inspired by Teeden's work, and it also feels like something you might see in an Iron Maiden album. It's very fucking cool. And then Wilds of Eldraine brought 2 new arts to Necropotence. This one was done by Kiriger, and it's very lovely, but it's hardly my favorite. And then this version by Abigail Larson. Fantastic line work in this art specifically. I really appreciate the contrast of the colors used, and the very gentle gradient in the wisps of magic goes so fucking hard. Not surprisingly, but Necropotence has some amazing artworks. This card is so fucking cool. My only complaint about Necropotence is that it facilitated and encouraged a meta that lacked diversity. Still, this card is so fucking cool, and so fun to use, and it's such an interesting historical landmark for the game. But yeah, that's the Necropotence video. Hopefully it didn't disappoint, but I didn't even really know how to go about talking about this card since so many people have already done it and done it better. But if you enjoyed my particular flavor of bad YouTube video, you're more than welcome to check out some of my other poorly made videos. You can also like this video if you liked it. You can subscribe if you give a shit, but either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.